into that, and it will not release once it's put down into the safety reserve if you're below 800 psi. All right. So to reiterate this, to go over this again, the only time this comes into play is if I'm diving tank air only. If I'm below 800 psi, that would lock into place. It will not come up. Could you get in there and pry it, essentially, and pop it open? Yeah, you can. As you can see, it's not that easy to do. But you can get in there and pry it and pop it open. All right. If you're not at the 800 psi mark, you can push this down all day long. It's not going to hold. The only time it's going to hold is when you're below 800 psi. So what that is giving you is a reserve 800 psi of air that's built into the tank. It's just like on a motorcycle, a snowmobile, ATV, where you have reserve fuel. It's the same exact thing. So back to your redundancy. That is your pony tank. It's built into your system. All right. What happens if you have a failure somewhere? Why do we have failures? If we look at the history of equipment failures, what fails? It's what we allow it to fail, right? We allow human error to allow equipment to fail. There's very, very, very small margins of equipment failure. If the mask has a failure in the regulator, what does it do?
Breaks open.
Fails open, right? If the octo, because it's exactly the same regulator, identical, right? Except for this nice yellow ring. The spring is a smaller spring in here, and it's got a mouthpiece. These are designed to fail open, right? How many high pressure hose or low pressure hose failures have you ever seen? Non-OEM products, I'll tell you, there's product that comes from China that's a single sleeve. So in here you have a tubular sleeve. Over the top of that you have a wire mesh sleeve that's woven over the top of that, and then you have this heavy duty rubber that's over the top of that. I've seen in the aftermarket China knockoff stuff where you have a rubber sleeve with just a mesh covering. I've seen those fail. They get cut, you know. But we've actually, knock on wood, have not had a major hose failure whatsoever. And if it does fail, it usually will crack and just leak air. It doesn't rupture and split. Have you seen where your octo will leak or it'll fall off? Or I know you guys in Division 3 had an incident where this connection, there's an aftermarket product that popped off, right? And again, human error, probably, right? But what we know about this right here is if it's not on tight, what's going to happen? It's going to leak. It's going to tell you before you get in the water, hey, we've got a problem, tighten this down. All right, so that's something that is kind of built into that whole system. Be careful with your heads-up display wire, right? How it locks in there. There's a 90-degree fitting. If you guys, I don't think we gave you 90-degree fittings. Maybe I'll let you try one or two to see if you like it. It's a 90-degree swivel. It's a double-ended OEM, so either side, if it's not hooked up all the way, it will leak, right? So it has to be set there, but it gives you the ability to have 90-degree and kind of keeps this hose down a little bit. So I'll throw some to Sam's way for trial.
Is your setup have the 90? I mean, it seemed with that coming from the opposite side, it'd probably be the way to go, huh?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It just brings it down and allows you to sit it into that position. The mask, are you guys familiar with the positive pressure? So this is natural rubber positive pressure. Our natural rubber masks with positive pressure are tested and approved to WMD specs, right? So with supplied air, I'm not worried about if I take my mask off and it's leaking or free flowing with the positive pressure. Most of us got away from the positive pressure because when we come to the surface, we'd hit our mask down, it would pop and it would be screaming air. On supplied air, it doesn't matter to me, right? I'm also concerned with positive pressure if I'm not diving supplied air, that if I have a little bit of leakage around here, keeping that bad stuff from coming in, then I'm using too much air, right, with positive pressure. So that's another reason why a lot of departments went to demand. The challenge is depending on what we're diving in, let's say the North Branch of the Chicago River over here, we know what's in there, and it's nasty. I don't want anything leaking into my mask, getting into my face, especially spraying up and hitting me in the eyes. So with supplied air, you want positive pressure and you want natural rubber because of its ability to protect. The hatch, which is Interspiro specific, it was designed by a gentleman, the last name was Gill, Swedish designer. Interspiro bought the patent from him, so that's why you might hear this being called as the Gill. There's another product out there, it's called the ABV, ambient breathing valve. That one requires you to turn it, okay? And it's a single membrane that basically stops water from coming in. So if you have a demand mask and the ABV is open with that single membrane and it's not really solid and you get in the water and you don't take a breath, what's going to happen? You're going to have water coming through. With positive pressure, with the Gill, it's double layered. There's 8 O-rings built into this thing. All right. With positive pressure, I can go under and keep this thing open, and I'm not going to fill it up with water. The other nice thing with positive pressure is I can invert. All right. With a demand mask, if you invert and you go to take a breath, you might not get a breath because of the pressure variances. So with positive pressure, inverting is not a big deal. So when are we going to be inverting? Possibly hooking airbags up to a vehicle, right? That's probably our biggest area, trying to get down into a wheel well that's buried in the mud and we have to invert. So with positive pressure, you won't have that issue. What you are going to do is I'm gonna switch these out for you. Right away, there's an adjustment lever that we can take a micro screw and tighten these things up so that they don't pop. They don't come that way. Why, I don't know. We've asked, but I'm like, can't you just build these things with that adjustment lever on? It's a afterthought, I guess. But I've got a whole bunch of them, so I just usually replace these and pop these on. So I'll do that. That's super easy. But that way you can tighten these things down, and you can either have it so tight that you have to manually push this, or flip the lever, or take a really good deep breath for it to pop. All right. So that's the concerns there. The nose cup on these, if you've dove the Divator mask in the past, you probably have seen a 3-prong. These are the new 4 prongs, so you have a 4-prong adjustment level. So that can be adjusted to the specific diver. When we put your comm units in there, your microphone is not designed to sit right in front or underneath this. Some of the old 3-cup nose cones had a little cutout, and they thought that was supposed to be in there. If you ask OTS or you read the instructions, they'll tell you that this is to be offset. The clarity is much greater with it offset versus directly in front. The moisture from your breath actually saturates this microphone and distorts it a little bit if it's right in front, so you want that to offset. All right, so that's your comm unit. It's the same connection that you guys are currently using, that almost everybody in the Midwest that I know of, or nationwide now, almost everybody's using that. So you can plug and play into almost any comm unit. Questions about the masks? Heads up display. All right, let me show you, since I have them both here right now. So the difference between positive pressure, and when you're putting this on, you should spin this, not this, okay? So the difference between positive pressure and demand, positive pressure has your safety lever, right? That keeps it up and locked in. Essentially, the regulator is the same exact thing, right? What's different is the spring height. So what is different here is the spring height. See the difference? That's what makes it positive pressure, along with that safety lever, versus demand. So when we look at this octo, we're going to see a safety lever. Why do we have a safety lever on an octo that is a demand regulator, essentially? And that is to keep it in a safety motion so that when you're diving and you're dragging it through mud or you're inverting or whatever, that it doesn't sense that ambient change in free flow. Okay, so that is why that is there. But that is the difference. I can take this and put this there. I can take this and put this there and make it all work. It's the same exact parts. All right. That is the big difference. The other thing that you'll see on the Octo Reg, even though it's the same identical reg, is you're going to have, actually they didn't even put it on there. That's good. No, there it is. See the green O-ring? That green O-ring and the O-ring on the end of this one's black, this one's green. It's a different part number. It's the same exact thing, right? It's the same exact thing. But the way it's designed and manufactured and the way they account for it is by different colors. IKEA. When you put this back in, this regulator, if this was to go underneath like that, it's not going to work. I find masks like this all the time. My mask doesn't work. Well, it's because your safety lever is trying to push down and it's locked in there. So make sure that that is down. There's a channel. See the channel? Looks like a D. All right. These are designed to only go into that channel. So when we put this in, if I push this in all the way, you'll see that spoon drop. See how that spoon dropped? We know it's seated and it's in the right way. I have found these this way. I found these this way. I found these all sorts of different ways. How we get this stuff to work like that, I don't know. But people do. One thing that I could tell right away if I'm swimming up to you in the pool and your Octo is leaking, you probably don't have this